when a mysterious albino woman is abandoned at a bitter Cowboy'S ranch as cruel mockery. Her ethereal presence ignites a forbidden love that uncovers deadly secrets buried in the desert sand. The dust tasted of copper and shame. Jake Morrison spat into the dirt, watching the crimson streak disappear into the parched earth of his failing ranch. The sun hung merciless overhead, bleaching everything to bone white except for the dark stains on his knuckles. 3 days since the last fight in town. 3 days since they'd laughed at him again. The sound of wagon wheels cut through the desert silence. Jake squinted against the glare. A rickety cart approached his property line, driven by 2 men he recognized from Redemption's saloons. Their laughter carried on the wind like vultures circling carrion. Behind them, something white shifted in the wagon bed. Not something. Someone. The wagon stopped 50 yards from his porch. The driver, a gap-toothed man named Briggs, cupped his hands around his mouth. "Got a present for you, Morrison. Figured a broken-down cowboy like you might appreciate some company." They dumped her like a sack of grain. She hit the ground hard, dust billowing around her pale form. The men's laughter echoed across the wasteland as they whipped their horses into a gallop, leaving only tire tracks and the taste of cruelty in the air. Jake approached slowly, his boots crunching on the hardpan. The woman lay motionless, her skin so white it seemed to glow against the red earth. Hair like spun moonlight framed a face that belonged in church windows, not sprawled in the dirt of his godforsaken ranch. She was breathing, her eyes opened. Blue as winter sky, they fixed on his face with startling clarity. No fear, no shame, just recognition, as if she'd been expecting him. "They said you were dead inside," she whispered, her voice carrying a strange accent he couldn't place. "But I can see your heart beating from here." Jake helped her to the shade of his porch, noting how her skin felt cool despite the desert heat. She wore a simple white dress, torn at the hem but clean. Too clean for someone who'd been traveling rough country. "What's your name?" he asked, offering her water from his canteen. "Elena." She drank carefully, studying his face. "Elena Vasquez. And you're the man they call the Devil of Redemption." Jake's jaw tightened. That name followed him everywhere, earned in a moment of rage that had cost him everything. "They tell you why they brought you here?" "They said you collect broken things." Elena's fingers traced a pattern in the dust beside her. "But I'm not broken. I'm just different." Jake noticed what she was drawing. A symbol he'd seen before carved into rocks throughout the desert. Local Apache used it to mark sacred places. But Elena was clearly Mexican, her accent carrying the soft vowels of Sonora. "Where did you learn that symbol?" Elena's hand stilled. "My grandmother taught me. She said it meant hidden water, places where life could survive even in the wasteland." Jake stared at the marking. In 15 years of working this land, he'd never found water. His cattle died of thirst while his neighbors' herds thrived. But Elena had drawn the symbol pointing directly toward his barn. "There's something you need to see," he said. The barn stood like a monument to failure. Half the roof had collapsed 2 winters ago, and Jake had never bothered to repair it. What was the point? Nothing grew here. Nothing lived. But Elena walked straight to the back wall, her pale fingers tracing the weathered wood. "Here," she said. "Can you feel it?" Jake pressed his palm against the boards. A faint vibration thrummed through the wood, rhythmic as a heartbeat. He'd worked in this barn for years and never noticed. "Help me move these planks." Together, they pried away the rotted boards. Behind them lay a stone wall, ancient and carefully fitted. Apache work, but older than any settlement Jake knew about. Carved into the center stone was the same symbol Elena had drawn, but this one was filled with turquoise and silver. "My grandmother told me stories," Elena said, running her fingers over the carving. "About a place where her people hid during the wars. A sanctuary built by lovers from different tribes, where water flowed even in the driest years." Jake's throat felt tight. "Your grandmother was Apache?" "Half. The other half was Spanish, like my grandfather. They met here in this place during the Apache Wars. She said the land remembered love, Even after the lovers were gone, the stone was warm under Jake's touch, warmer than it should be in the shade, and beneath the warmth, that steady pulse, like water moving through hidden channels. Elena. His voice came out rougher than intended. Why did they really bring you here? Her blue eyes met his, and for a moment he saw something ancient in them, something that had been waiting. Because they're afraid of what I might find. Sheriff Hawkins arrived at sunset, his badge catching the last light like a warning. 2 deputies flanked him, hands resting on their gun belts. Jake had been expecting this visit since the moment Elena arrived. Heard you got yourself some company, Morrison. Jake stepped onto his porch, positioning himself between the lawman and the house where Elena waited. She's under my protection. Hawkins laughed, the sound sharp as breaking glass. Protection? From what? The girl's simple, Jake. Touched in the head, her own family couldn't handle her anymore. That's not what Briggs said when he dumped her here. Briggs talks too much. Hawkins's eyes narrowed. Point is, the girl belongs in the territorial asylum. It's for her own good. Through the window, Jake could see Elena's silhouette. She stood perfectly still, but her presence filled the house like light filling a lantern. The thought of her locked away in that hellhole made his chest tight with rage. She stays here. You got no legal claim to her, Morrison. And after what happened in town last week, Hawkins let the threat hang in the air. Folks are starting to wonder if you're as dangerous as they say. Jake's hand moved instinctively toward his gun. The deputies tensed, ready to draw. But Elena's voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. Sheriff Hawkins. She stepped onto the porch, her white dress luminous in the gathering dusk. The lawman stared, transfixed by her otherworldly appearance. I know why you're here, she continued, her accent lending music to the words. But I'm not the one you should fear. Hawkins found his voice. Girl, you need to come with us. It's the law. Whose law? Elena tilted her head, studying him with those unsettling blue eyes. The law that says a woman with different skin belongs in a cage? Or the law that says stolen land can never truly be owned? The sheriff's face flushed red. You watch your tongue, girl. I've been watching more than my tongue, Sheriff. I've been watching the water. Hawkins went very still. What water? Elena smiled, and Jake felt the world shift around them like sand in an hourglass. The water you've been stealing from the Apache reservation. The water you've been selling to the big ranchers while the native families die of thirst. Her voice remained soft, musical, but her words hit like bullets. The water that flows through the hidden channels beneath this land. You don't know what you're talking about. Don't I? Elena stepped closer, and Jake noticed how the air around her seemed to shimmer. Then why are you so afraid of what I might find in Jake's barn? Hawkins' hand dropped to his gun. That's enough. But Jake was already moving, his own weapon clearing leather with practiced speed. The deputies froze, caught between their sheriff's rage and the deadly reputation of the man they faced. You heard the lady, Jake said quietly. Time for you to leave. For a long moment, the desert held its breath. Then Hawkins holstered his gun, his face twisted with fury and something that looked like fear. This isn't over, Morrison. That girl's dangerous, and you're a fool if you can't see it. If the lawmen mounted their horses and rode into the darkness, leaving Jake and Elena alone under the vast canopy of stars. Water theft, Jake said finally. That's what this is about? Elena nodded, her pale skin luminous in the moonlight. My grandmother's people have been dying of thirst while Hawkins sells their water to the highest bidder. But the real crime isn't theft, Jake. It's what he's been hiding in the process. What do you mean? Elena's eyes found his in the darkness. Tomorrow we open the sanctuary, and then you'll understand why they wanted me gone. Dawn came like a whispered promise, painting the desert in shades of rose and gold. Jake found Elena already at the barn, her hands pressed against the ancient stone wall. The turquoise inlay seemed to pulse with inner light. It's a lock, she said without turning around. But not the kind you open with a key. Jake studied the carved symbol. Up close, he could see it was actually composed of multiple interlocking pieces, like a puzzle waiting to be solved. How do we open it? Together. Elena's fingers found his, guiding them to specific points on the carving. My grandmother said the sanctuary could only be opened by two hearts beating as one. The Apache and Spanish lovers who built it made sure of that. Their palms pressed against the stone, and Jake felt that strange pulse again, stronger now. The turquoise began to glow, and with a grinding sound that seemed to come from deep in the earth, the wall began to move. The passage beyond was narrow but well constructed, lined with the same fitted stones. Cool air flowed from the depths, carrying the impossible scent of water and growing things. Elena produced a torch from somewhere in her dress, and Jake didn't question how she'd known to bring it. The tunnel sloped downward for perhaps 50 yards before opening into a vast underground chamber. Jake's torch flame danced across walls covered in pictographs, telling the story of the lovers who had built this place. But it was the center of the chamber that stole his breath. A natural spring bubbled up from the rock floor, feeding a pool of crystal-clear water. Around the pool, someone had built a garden. Not recently, but not ancient either. The plants were carefully tended, thriving in the filtered light that came from hidden openings in the ceiling. Impossible, Jake breathed. This much water, this close to the surface, it would have been found years ago. Elena knelt beside the pool, her reflection wavering in the clear water. It was found. By my grandmother and her lover. They built the sanctuary to protect it, and their descendants have been guarding it ever since. Descendants? Jake's mind raced. Elena, how long have you known about this place? She stood slowly, water droplets falling from her fingers like liquid diamonds. I was born here, Jake. In this chamber, during the worst drought in 50 years. My grandmother said the spring chose me, marked me as its guardian. Jake stared at her pale skin, her ethereal beauty, and suddenly understood. The albinism, it's not a curse. It's a blessing, a sign. The Apache have stories about children born white as snow, chosen by the spirits to guard sacred places. Elena's voice carried the weight of generations. But Hawkins found out about the spring 5 years ago. He's been siphoning water from the underground channels, selling it while people die of thirst. And your family? Elena's face darkened. Dead. All of them. Hawkins made sure of that when they tried to stop him. I'm the last guardian, Jake. The last one who knows how to protect this place. Jake felt the pieces clicking together like the tumblers of a lock. That's why they brought you here. Not as mockery. As bait. They know I'll try to restore the spring to its rightful purpose, and they know. Elena's eyes met his, vulnerable for the first time since he'd found her in the dust. They know I can't do it alone. The sound of horses echoed from above, growing closer. Too many horses for a social visit. They're coming, Elena whispered. Jake drew his gun, checking the cylinder. 6 shots. Against how many men? There's another way out, Elena said, pointing to a passage on the far side of the chamber. But Jake, if we run now, this place dies with us. The spring will be lost forever. Jake looked at the clear water, the thriving garden, the pictographs telling their story of love conquering hatred. Then he looked at Elena, this strange, beautiful woman who had appeared in his life like an answer to a prayer he'd never known how to speak. Then we don't run. The first explosion shook dust from the ceiling. Dynamite. Hawkins wasn't taking any chances this time. They're trying to collapse the entrance, Elena said, her voice steady despite the chaos above. But there are other ways in. Hawkins has been mapping the underground channels for years. Jake counted the weapons they had. His revolver, a rifle Elena had somehow produced from the shadows, and whatever advantage the terrain might give them. Against a sheriff's posse with dynamite and local knowledge. How many men does he usually ride with? 8, maybe 10. Elena checked the rifle with practiced efficiency. But Jake, there's something else you need to know. Another explosion, closer this time. Voices echoed down the tunnel, harsh and urgent. Tell me. Elena's blue eyes were luminous in the torchlight. Hawkins isn't just stealing water. He's been poisoning the reservation wells, making the Apache desperate enough to sell their land for nothing. This spring is the only clean water source for 100 miles. Jake felt cold rage settle in his chest. How many people has he killed? Dozens. Children mostly. The old ones. Anyone too weak to survive contaminated water. Elena's voice broke slightly. My little sister was one of them. The voices were getting closer. Jake could make out individual words now, orders being shouted in the echoing tunnels. There. Elena pointed to a narrow ledge that ran around the chamber, about 15 feet above the floor. We can get above them when they come through. They climbed quickly, Jake's boots finding purchase on the ancient handholds carved into the rock. From their vantage point, they could see 3 tunnel entrances leading into the chamber. Hawkins had done his homework. Elena. Jake's voice was quiet, urgent. Whatever happens, you need to survive this. You're the only one who can expose what he's done. We survive this together, or not at all. The first man appeared at the main entrance, moving cautiously with his gun drawn. Jake recognized him as one of Hawkins's regular deputies. 2 more followed, then Hawkins himself, his badge glinting in the torchlight. I know you're in here, Morrison. Hawkins's voice echoed off the stone walls. And I know you've got the girl with you. Jake remained silent, watching as more men emerged from the side tunnels. 8 total, just as Elena had predicted. All armed, all positioned to prevent escape. You see this place? Hawkins gestured at the spring, the garden, the ancient pictographs. This is what happens when people don't know their place, when they think they can stand against progress. One of the deputies, a young man Jake didn't recognize, stared at the clear water with obvious thirst. Sheriff, maybe we could just what, boy? Let them poison more minds with their savage superstitions? Hawkins' voice turned ugly. This spring belongs to civilized people now. People who know how to use it properly. By selling it while children die? Elena's voice rang out from the shadows above. The men spun, guns raised, but the acoustics of the chamber made it impossible to pinpoint her location. There she is. Hawkins pointed his weapon at the darkness. The albino witch. You see what I mean, boys? Unnatural. Dangerous. The only unnatural thing here is your greed, Elena replied, and the only dangerous thing is your fear of the truth. Jake saw his moment. While the men were focused on Elena's voice, he dropped silently from the ledge behind them. His first shot took down the deputy nearest the main entrance. His second sent another man diving for cover behind the rocks. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Gunfire echoed off the walls, muzzle flashes strobing in the darkness. Jake rolled behind the spring's stone rim, using the natural cover to pick his shots carefully. Elena's rifle cracked from above and another deputy cried out, clutching his shoulder. But there were still too many of them, and Jake's ammunition wouldn't last forever. Burn them out, Hawkins shouted. Torch the whole place. One of the men produced a bottle of kerosene, splashing it across the ancient pictographs. The smell of fuel filled the chamber, sharp and acrid. No! Elena's cry was anguished. Those paintings are irreplaceable. She dropped from the ledge, landing cat-like near the pool. Her rifle spoke again, and the man with the kerosene spun and fell. But the movement had revealed her position. Hawkins' gun boomed. Elena stumbled, red spreading across the white fabric of her dress. Jake's world went red. He rose from cover, his revolver speaking with deadly precision. 2 more deputies fell before the others could react, but his gun clicked empty, and Hawkins was still standing. Drop it, Morrison! The sheriff's weapon was trained on Elena, who knelt beside the spring, one hand pressed to her wounded side. Or the witch dies right here. Jake let his gun fall to the stone floor. Around them, the surviving deputies kept their weapons trained on both prisoners. You know what your problem is, Morrison? Hawkins approached slowly, his gun never wavering. You never learned when to quit, just like your daddy. Jake went very still. What did you say? Oh, you didn't know? Hawkins smiled, the expression ugly in the torchlight. Your father found this place too about 20 years ago. Started asking questions about water rights, about who really owned this land. Had to be dealt with just like you. The world seemed to tilt around Jake. His father's death had been ruled an accident, a fall from his horse during a routine cattle drive. You killed him. I protected the interests of civilized people, just like I'm doing now. Hawkins cocked his revolver. But first the girl dies. Can't have her spreading her poison anymore. Elena looked up at Jake, her blue eyes bright with pain and something else. Something that looked like forgiveness. Jake, she whispered. The spring. It remembers. Elena's hand touched the water, and the chamber filled with light. Not torchlight. Not the harsh glare of muzzle flashes. Something older, deeper, that seemed to come from the stone itself. The pictographs began to glow, their ancient pigments responding to some force Jake couldn't understand. What the hell? Hawkins stumbled backward, his gun wavering. The light grew stronger and Jake could see the pictographs moving. Not literally, but the story they told seemed to come alive in the dancing illumination. He saw the Apache woman and her Spanish lover, saw them building this sanctuary together, saw them hiding here during the wars, protecting not just the water but something more precious. Their children. Mixed blood children who would have been outcasts in both worlds, but who found acceptance in this hidden place. The spring doesn't just remember love, Elena said, her voice growing stronger despite her wound. It remembers justice, and it's been waiting for someone to set things right. The water began to rise, not flooding, but flowing upward through channels Jake hadn't noticed before. Ancient engineering designed to carry the spring's gift throughout the desert. The sound of rushing water filled the chamber, and Jake realized the truth. This wasn't just a hidden spring, it was the source. The mother spring that fed every water source for miles around. And Hawkins had been choking it off, forcing the water through his own channels, his own control. Impossible, Hawkins breathed. Water doesn't flow uphill. It does when it's going home, Elena replied. The deputies were backing toward the tunnels, fear replacing greed in their eyes. But Hawkins stood his ground, his weapon still trained on Elena. I don't care what kind of Apache magic this is, he snarled. You're still going to die. His finger tightened on the trigger. The spring chose you too, Jake. The moment you protected me, the moment you chose love over fear. Her blue eyes were luminous with tears and power. You're the other guardian, the one it's been waiting for. Jake felt strength flowing back into his limbs. Not just physical strength, but something deeper. A connection to this place, to Elena, to the ancient purpose that had built this sanctuary. He stood, facing Hawkins across the glowing chamber. The sheriff's face was twisted with rage and disbelief. This isn't over, Morrison. You think some Indian magic can stop progress? Can stop civilization? No, Jake said quietly. But justice can. The water continued to rise, flowing through channels that led to every corner of the desert. Jake could feel it spreading, carrying life back to places that had been dying of thirst. The Apache reservation, the small farms, even the town of Redemption itself. Hawkins raised his gun again, but his remaining deputies were already fleeing. The sound of their boots echoed from the tunnels as they ran toward the surface, toward a world that was about to change forever. You've destroyed everything, Hawkins screamed. 20 years of work, 20 years of building something better than this savage wasteland. 20 years of murder, Elena corrected. 20 years of stealing what was never yours to take. The sheriff's gun boomed in the enclosed space, but Jake was already moving. The bullet sparked off stone as he tackled Hawkins, both men crashing into the shallow water at the pool's edge. They fought in the sacred spring, their struggle sending ripples across the glowing surface. Hawkins was strong, desperate, but Jake fought with the fury of a man who had finally found something worth protecting. The sheriff's head went under. He came up gasping, his badge torn from his shirt floating on the water like a discarded lie. Please, Hawkins choked. I was just trying to build something to make this place civilized. Jake held him there at the edge of drowning and felt the weight of choice. It would be easy to let go. to let the spring claim this man who had caused so much death. But Elena's hand touched his shoulder. "Justice," she said softly. "Not vengeance." Jake pulled Hawkins from the water, depositing him on the stone floor like a landed fish. The man lay there gasping, broken, his empire of theft crumbling around him. "The territorial marshal will want to hear your confession," Jake said. "About the water theft, about the poisoned wells, about my father." Hawkins said nothing, but his eyes held the hollow look of a man who knew his reckoning had come. 3 days later, Jake stood on his porch watching the desert bloom. The spring's water had reached every corner of the wasteland, turning red earth green with new life. His cattle grazed in pastures that had been barren for decades. Elena sat beside him, her wound healed but her white dress still stained with blood, a reminder of the price they'd paid for this miracle. "The territorial marshal wants to make you sheriff," she said, not looking at him. "Redemption needs new leadership." Jake nodded. He'd expected this. With Hawkins in custody and his deputies scattered, someone had to maintain order. And who better than the man who'd exposed the corruption? "It's a good offer," Elena continued. "Steady pay, respect, a chance to build something legitimate." "But," Elena's blue eyes met his, "but it means staying in town, playing by their rules, becoming part of the system that allowed Hawkins to operate for so long." Jake understood. The badge came with compromises, politics, the need to work within laws that had been written to favor men like Hawkins. He could do good as sheriff, but he'd always be constrained by the very civilization that had created the problem. "What's the alternative?" Elena gestured toward the desert, now green with new growth. "We stay here, guard the spring, make sure it's never corrupted again." She paused. "But that means living outside the law, being outcasts, the albino woman and her broken cowboy hiding in the wasteland." It was a choice between integration and isolation, between working within a flawed system or protecting something pure from outside it, between the respect of civilized society and the freedom to follow their own moral compass. Jake thought about his father, who had tried to work within the system and died for it. He thought about Elena's family, who had tried to protect their sacred places through legal channels and been murdered for their efforts. "There's a third option," he said finally. Elena raised an eyebrow. "We take the badge, but we use it to change the system from within. Make sure the spring's water reaches everyone who needs it, not just those who can pay." Jake's voice grew stronger as the plan took shape. "We build something new, a law that serves justice, not just order. That's dangerous, Jake. The moment you start threatening their profits, they'll come for you, just like they came for your father." "Let them come." Jake's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "They're not facing one broken cowboy anymore. They're facing the guardians of the spring. And we have something they don't." "What's that?" Jake smiled, feeling the ancient power flowing through the water beneath their feet, connecting them to every living thing in the desert. "We have each other and we have the truth." The confrontation came 6 months later, when the big ranchers realized their monopoly on water was broken forever. They rode to Jake's ranch with hired guns and legal papers, demanding he shut down the spring's flow to the reservation. Jake met them at his property line, the sheriff's badge bright on his chest. Elena stood beside him, no longer hiding her otherworldly nature but embracing it as a symbol of the change sweeping through the territory. Sheriff Morrison, the lead rancher, a man named Caldwell, dismounted from his horse. "We've got court orders here. That water belongs to established claims, not some savage reservation." Jake examined the papers, legal language designed to sound official while meaning nothing. These orders were signed by Judge Patterson, the same judge who's been taking bribes from water thieves for the past decade. "You can't prove that." Actually, I can. Jake produced a leather journal from his saddlebag. Hawkins kept detailed records. Every bribe, every illegal deal, every murder disguised as an accident. He looked up at Caldwell, including the order to kill my father. The rancher's face went pale. Behind him, his hired guns shifted nervously. They'd been paid to intimidate a broken-down cowboy, not face down a lawman with evidence of their employer's crimes. "You're bluffing," Caldwell said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I?" Jake opened the journal, reading from Hawkins' careful handwriting. March 15, 1887. Paid Caldwell $500 to arrange Morrison's accident. Made it look like horse threw him. Body found in canyon. No witnesses. Caldwell's hand moved toward his gun, but Elena's voice stopped him cold. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." The rancher looked around and realized they were surrounded. Not by hired guns or deputies, but by Apache warriors, Mexican farmers, and townspeople from Redemption, all of them armed. All of them united by their need for the spring's life-giving water. "You see," Elena continued, her pale skin luminous in the desert sun, "the spring doesn't just remember love and justice, it remembers community. And this community has decided to protect what's theirs." Caldwell looked at the faces surrounding him, people he'd considered beneath notice now standing together with quiet determination. His hired guns were already backing away, unwilling to face these odds. "This isn't over," he said, but the words sounded hollow. "Yes, it is." Jake's voice carried the authority of his badge and something deeper. The authority of a man who had found his purpose. "The territorial governor is sending investigators. The federal marshal is reviewing water rights across the entire territory. And every crime in Hawkins' journal is being prosecuted to the full extent of the law." Caldwell and his men rode away, leaving Jake and Elena standing in the desert that was no longer a wasteland. Around them, the community they'd helped build began to disperse, returning to farms and homes that now had all the water they needed. "Think it will stick?" Elena asked, watching the dust settle. Jake looked at the green fields stretching to the horizon, at the Apache children playing in streams that ran clear and pure, at the town of Redemption rebuilding itself on principles of justice rather than greed. "It'll stick," he said, "because it's not built on fear anymore, it's built on something stronger." Elena smiled, and Jake felt that familiar pulse of connection, the rhythm of the spring flowing beneath their feet, carrying life to every corner of their world. "What's that?" Jake pulled her close, tasting the promise of rain on the desert wind. "Love, and the courage to fight for it." 5 years later, Sheriff Jake Morrison stood in the same spot where Elena had been dumped like refuse, watching his children play in the shade of cottonwood trees that had grown tall and strong beside the flowing stream. Elena emerged from their house, her white dress clean and bright, her belly round with their third child. The albino woman who had once been seen as cursed was now revered as a healer, a bridge between worlds, a guardian of the sacred spring that had transformed the entire territory. "The territorial capital wants to name you for governor," she said, settling beside him on the porch swing they'd built together. Jake laughed. "And leave all this? I don't think so." "The spring will always be here, Jake, and there are other places that need what we've learned. Other communities that need someone to show them how to choose love over fear." Jake considered this. In 5 years, they'd transformed not just their corner of the desert, but the entire territory's approach to water rights, land use, and justice. Other territories were sending delegations to study their methods. The federal government was considering their model for national policy. "Maybe," he said, "but not yet. We've got roots here now, deep ones." Elena's hand found his, their fingers intertwining as naturally as water finding its course. Around them, the desert bloomed with life that had seemed impossible just a few years before. Besides, Jake added, watching their children chase fireflies in the gathering dusk, someone needs to make sure the next generation knows the real story. About the spring, about the choice between justice and greed, about what happens when two people decide to fight for something bigger than themselves. Elena leaned against his shoulder, her pale skin luminous in the starlight. And what story is that? Jake smiled, feeling the ancient pulse of the spring beneath their feet, connecting them to every living thing in their transformed world. The story of how love conquered the wasteland, and how sometimes the most broken people are the ones chosen to heal the world. The desert wind carried their laughter across the green fields, where water flowed free and pure under the endless western sky. Thank you for watching this tale of love, justice, and redemption in the Old West. If you enjoyed the Albino Virgin, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. We've got more untold stories of the frontier coming your way. Next week, we'll explore the mystery of the Ghost Rider of Devil's Canyon, where a vengeful spirit seeks justice for a massacre that history tried to forget. Until then, remember that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who change the world.